The toxic atmosphere of Kepler 442c painted the mining facility in sickly green hues as Lieutenant Eric Vance's transport touched down on the emergency landing pad. Through his helmet's HUD, warning indicators flashed red, atmospheric toxicity levels. We're climbing by the hour. Medic team, move out. Eric barked into his comm, grabbing his medical kit as the transport's doors hissed open. Behind him, Corporal Jackson and Private Torres followed, their boots clanging against the metal grating. The mining facility's corridors reeked of chemical burns and fear. Director Hawkins met them at the entrance, his face pale behind his environmental suit. "Thank God you're here, Vance. We've got multiple casualties from the atmospheric breach, but the worst is Ambassador Sailari. She's not responding to our treatment protocols." Eric's pulse quickened. The Ventari ambassador was here for the joint mining rights negotiation, a delicate diplomatic mission that could reshape human-alien relations. "Where is she?" Medical Bay, Section C. "But Eric." Hawkins grabbed his arm. "Our xenobiology expert says her physiology is unlike anything we've encountered. She's dying, and we don't know how to help her." Eric sprinted through the facilities, maze-like corridors, his medical training overriding diplomatic concerns. The Ventari were a rare species, seldom seen beyond their home system. This was only the second time humans had worked directly with them. The medical bay doors slid open to reveal a scene of controlled chaos. Ambassador Sailari lay on the examination table, her elegant form racked with tremors. Her skin, normally a luminescent pale blue according to the briefings, had turned a sickly gray. Her breathing was labored, each breath a struggle against the toxins ravaging her system. "Status report," Eric demanded, approaching the table. "Massive organ failure," reported Dr. Kessler, the facility's chief medical officer. "The atmospheric toxins are attacking her circulatory system. We've tried standard detox protocols, but nothing's working. Her blood chemistry is completely foreign to us." Eric studied the readouts, his mind racing. The Ventari physiology was indeed unique. Their blood contained metallic compounds that processed oxygen differently from humans. But there was something else, something the scanners showed that made him pause. "Her blood isn't just failing," he murmured. "It's crystallizing. The toxins are causing a chain reaction." He looked up at Sailari's face, noting the delicate features that seemed almost ethereal despite her current state. Her eyes fluttered open, deep violet orbs that seemed to hold ancient wisdom. Can you help?" she whispered, her voice melodic even in distress. "I'm going to try something," Eric said, already reaching for his emergency transfusion kit. "Dr. Kessler, I need you to prepare a direct blood transfer system." "Are you insane? Human blood could poison her further." "Look at these readings," Eric pointed to his scanner. "Human blood has a base iron content that might neutralize the crystallization process. It's risky, but she's dying anyway." Sailari's hand weakly grasped his wrist. "I trust you," she breathed. Eric felt something electric pass between them at her touch, but he pushed the sensation aside. He quickly established the transfusion line, his hand steady despite the unprecedented nature of the procedure. As his blood began flowing into her system, Sailari's eyes widened with an expression he couldn't quite read. Shock, recognition, something deeper. "By the 7 moons," she whispered, staring at him with newfound intensity. The monitors began, showing improvement almost immediately. Her skin regained its luminescent quality and her breathing stabilized, but Eric noticed something else. Sailari continued to stare at him with an expression of wonder and something that looked almost like devotion. "The procedure worked," Dr. Kessler announced, amazement in his voice. "Her blood chemistry is stabilizing. How did you know?" "Lucky guess," Eric replied, though he felt there was more to it than luck. Something about Sailari seemed to call to him on a level he couldn't explain. As the transfusion completed, Sailari sat up slowly, her violet eyes never leaving Eric's face. "You have saved my life," she said formally, though her voice carried undertones of something deeper. "I am forever in your debt." "Just doing my job, Ambassador," Eric replied, beginning to pack up his equipment. Rest now. You'll need time to recover. But as he turned to leave, he caught her whispered words, forever bound by blood. 3 days later, the diplomatic mission concluded successfully. The Ventari delegation departed with formal thanks and promises of continued cooperation. Eric returned to Earth, filing his medical report and thinking nothing more of the emergency procedure that had saved an alien ambassador's life. He had no idea that in the eyes of the Ventari, he had just performed the most sacred act of their species, one that would change his life forever. 6 months had passed since the Kepler 442c incident, and Lieutenant Eric Vance had settled back into his routine at the Titan Medical Research Facility. The emergency transfusion had earned him a commendation, but to him, it was just another day's work. He was reviewing patient files when his assistant technician Blake burst through his office door. "Sir, you need to see this. There's a Ventari diplomatic vessel requesting permission to dock, specifically asking for you." Eric looked up from his datapad, confusion creasing his brow. "Asking for me? Are you sure?" "Positive, sir. They've been broadcasting on all frequencies for the past hour. We seek Lieutenant Eric Vance for matters of highest importance to the Ventari crown." Through his office's viewport, Eric could see the sleek, crystalline ship hovering in the station's approach vector. Its bioluminescent hull pulsed with soft blue, light, beautiful and alien. A knot formed in his stomach as he remembered violet eyes and whispered words he hadn't understood. An hour later, Eric stood in the docking bay as the Ventari ship's airlock cycled open. First emerged 4 guards in ceremonial armor that seemed to be grown rather than forged, their faces hidden behind elegant masks. Then she appeared. Ambassador Sciolari stepped through the airlock with fluid grace, but she looked different from the dying woman he'd saved. She wore robes of deep purple that seemed to shimmer with their own light, and her pale blue skin glowed with health. Her long silver hair was intricately braided with what looked like small crystals, and around her neck hung an elaborate collar of precious metals, clearly markers of high rank. But it was her eyes that stopped Eric's breath. Those same violet orbs now held a mixture of joy, determination, and something that made his heart race unexpectedly. "Lieutenant Eric Vance," she said, her melodic voice carrying formal weight as she approached. The guards flanked her, hands resting on weapons that looked more like works of art than tools of war. "Ambassador Sciolari," Eric replied, inclining his head respectfully. "This is unexpected. I hope you're feeling well after your recovery." A small smile played at her lips. "More than well, thanks to you." She paused, studying his face with an intensity that made him shift uncomfortably. "But I have come on a matter of the greatest importance. We must speak privately." Eric led them to Conference Room Alpha, the facility's most secure diplomatic chamber. As the doors sealed, Sciolari dismissed her guards with a gesture, leaving them alone. The moment they were private, her formal demeanor softened, revealing something vulnerable beneath. "Eric," she said, using his first name for the first time, "do you remember what occurred between us on Kepler 442c? The transfusion, of course. I'm glad it worked." "It worked far better than you know," she interrupted, moving closer. "Among my people, the sharing of blood is not merely medical procedure. It is Thrayanon, the sacred bonding of souls. When you gave me your life essence, you did not simply save me. You bound us together for eternity." Eric stared at her, his mind struggling to process her words. What? "Ambassador, I think there's been a misunderstanding, but there is no misunderstanding," Sciolari said firmly, though her voice remained gentle. "By the ancient laws of my people, we are now bonded, mated. What you call marriage is but a pale shadow of what we share." "But that's—" Eric ran his hands through his hair, pacing to the viewport. "That's impossible. I was performing emergency medicine. I had no idea." "Intent matters not in the eyes of the eternal flow," Sciolari continued, following him. "The bond was created the moment our blood mingled, and Eric—" She paused, her hand moving to rest protectively over her abdomen. "There is more." Eric turned back to her, seeing something in her expression that made his world tilt. "More?" "The bonding was fertile. I carry a child, Eric. Our child. A life born from the sacred union of our essences. Eric's legs nearly gave out. He gripped the edge of a chair, staring at her in shock. A child? But we're different species, that's not possible. The Ventari have always been adaptable. Our physiology can harmonize with compatible species during true bonding. The medical scans confirm it. Our child will be healthy, a bridge between our peoples. Sayalari approached him slowly, her movements careful and graceful. I know this comes as a shock, but I also know what I felt when our blood joined. Did you feel nothing, Eric? No connection, no sense of rightness? Eric closed his eyes, remembering that moment in the medical bay, the electric sensation when she'd touched his wrist, the way her eyes had seemed to see straight into his soul, the strange pull he'd felt toward her that he'd dismissed as adrenaline. I felt something, but I thought it was just the stress of the situation. It was not stress, Sayalari said softly, now standing close enough that he could smell her subtle floral scent. It was recognition, soul calling to soul across the void between species. Eric opened his eyes to find her gazing at him with such tenderness that his breath caught. What does this mean? What happens now? Now, Sayalari said, reaching out to gently touch his cheek. We face this together. I have come to claim my bondmate and to carry our child in the place where we both belong together. Eric felt something shift inside him at her touch, a warmth that had nothing to do with physical sensation. And if I refuse? If I say this is all a mistake? Pain flashed across Sayalari's features, quickly hidden. Then I will raise our child, alone, and honor the bond in solitude. But I will never seek another mate. The bond is eternal, Eric, for both of us. Looking into her eyes, seeing the vulnerability beneath her regal bearing, Eric realized that his life had just changed in ways he couldn't yet comprehend. But as shocking as her revelation was, he couldn't deny the pull he felt toward her. Connection that went deeper than mere attraction. We need to talk more, he said finally. About everything. This is going to change both our worlds. Sayalari smiled, and for the first time since entering the room, she looked truly happy. Yes, she agreed, it is. 2 weeks later, Eric found himself sharing diplomatic quarters with the most enigmatic woman he'd ever met. The Earth government and Ventari Council were in deep negotiations about the unprecedented situation. But in the meantime, Eric and Sayalari were effectively confined together while the bureaucrats decided their fate. The quarters were luxurious by station standards: a sitting area, small kitchen, 2 bedrooms, and a private viewport showing Earth's blue marble beauty. But luxury couldn't ease the tension of 2 beings learning to coexist while the galaxy watched. Eric sat at the small dining table, reviewing the xenobiology reports about Ventari reproduction that the medical team had compiled. The science was fascinating and terrifying in equal measure. Their child would indeed be viable, a first in recorded interspecies relations. You are troubled, Sayalari observed, emerging from her meditation chamber. She'd changed from her formal robes into simpler clothing that somehow made her seem more approachable, more real. Trying to understand, Eric admitted, setting down his datapad. The genetic compatibility, the bonding process, it's unlike anything in human experience. Sayalari moved to the food synthesizer, her movements graceful even in the mundane task of preparing tea. Perhaps understanding comes not from data but from acceptance. Easy for you to say. You grew up knowing about soul bonds and sacred rituals. I grew up thinking blood transfusions were purely medical procedures. She turned to face him, holding 2 steaming cups. Do you think this is easy for me, Eric? I am the first of my people to bond with an alien species. The council debates whether our child will be accepted into Ventari society. Some call what we share an abomination. Eric accepted the offered cup, their fingers brushing in the exchange. The same electric sensation sparked between them. Stronger now, impossible to ignore. I'm sorry, I didn't think about what you're facing. We are both walking uncharted paths. Sci-Fi said, settling into the chair across from him. But we do not walk them alone. Over the following days, they began to learn about each other beyond the diplomatic protocols. Eric discovered that Sci-Fi was a scholar as well as an ambassador, fascinated by ancient Ventari poetry. She learned that Eric had become a medic after losing his younger sister to a rare disease, driven by a need to heal others. "You carry pain," she observed, one evening as they watched Earth's sunset through the viewport. She sat beside him on the small couch, close enough that he could feel her warmth. "Everyone carries pain," Eric replied, but he didn't move away from her proximity. "Not everyone transforms their pain into purpose," Sci-Fi said softly. "It is one of the things I admire about you." Eric turned to look at her, struck by the sincerity in her voice. "One of the things?" A faint blush colored her pale cheeks. Apparently some reactions were universal. "You are brave without being reckless, gentle without being weak. When you saved my life, you asked for nothing in return. Among my people, such selflessness is highly valued. I was just doing my job." "No," Sci-Fi said firmly, turning to face him fully. "You risked unknown consequences to save a stranger. That is not duty, that is compassion." Their faces were inches apart now, and Eric could see flecks of silver in her violet eyes. The pull between them was undeniable, a gravity that seemed to draw them together despite all the complications surrounding them. "Sci-Fi," he whispered, her name feeling right on his lips. "Yes?" Instead of answering with words, Eric reached up to touch her face, marveling at the softness of her skin. She leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering closed. "Is this the bond?" he asked. "This feeling between us?" "The bond amplifies what already exists," she replied, opening her eyes to meet his. "But the feeling itself, that comes from the heart." Eric leaned closer, drawn by something deeper than alien magic or mystical bonds. When their lips met, it was soft, tentative, a question rather than a demand. Sci-Fi responded with gentle warmth, her hand coming up to rest over his heart. The kiss deepened slowly, naturally, as if they were discovering something precious that required careful handling. When they finally parted, both were breathing heavily. "Eric," Sci-Fi whispered, against his lips. "I know this is complicated," Eric said, his forehead resting against hers. "I know there are political implications and cultural barriers and 1,000 reasons why this is impossible." "But?" she asked, hope coloring her voice. "But I can't deny what I feel when I'm with you. It's not just the bond or the situation or any external force. It's you, Sci-Fi. It's who you are." Tears gathered in her violet eyes. "I had hoped, but I dared not assume." Eric kissed her again, more confidently this time, pouring his growing feelings into the connection between them. When his hands moved to her waist, she pressed closer, her own hands tangling in his hair. "Are you certain?" she asked as his lips moved to trace the elegant line of her neck. "Once we truly join, the bond will deepen. There will be no returning to what we were before." Eric pulled back to look into her eyes, seeing not just the exotic, alien ambassador, but the woman beneath, vulnerable, hopeful, caring. "I'm tired of fighting what feels right," he said. "If we're bound by blood, let us be bound by choice as well." Sci-Fi's smile was radiant as she took his hand and led him toward her bedroom. "Then let us discover what it truly means to be one, soul and two bodies." The night that followed was a revelation of tender passion and deep connection. They learned each other's bodies with careful reverence, discovering that desire transcended species barriers. When they finally joined completely, the bond between them blazed to life with startling intensity, leaving them both gasping at the profound sense of unity. Afterward, as they lay entwined beneath the soft sheets, Eric traced patterns on Sci-Fi's glowing skin while she rested her hand on the slight curve of her belly. "Our child will be beautiful," she murmured drowsily. "Our child will be loved," Eric replied, surprising himself with how naturally the words came. Whatever challenges we face, they'll know they were wanted. Silari lifted her head to look at him, her expression soft with contentment. I love you, Eric Vance. Not because of bonds or rituals or duty, but because of who you are. I love you too, Eric replied, meaning it completely. My mysterious, impossible, wonderful alien wife. Silari laughed, the sound like crystal chimes. Wife is such a small word for what we are. Then what's the Ventari word? Silanthre, she whispered. Soul joined. Two hearts beating as one across all time and space. Eric smiled, pulling her closer. I like that better. Outside their viewport, stars wheeled in their ancient courses, indifferent to the momentous changes happening in one small diplomatic suite. But inside, two beings from different worlds had found something precious, a love that transcended every barrier between them. 3 months into their cohabitation, news of the human-Ventari bond had leaked to the galactic media. Eric woke to find protesters gathered outside the diplomatic compound, some human, some alien, all united in their opposition to what they saw as an unnatural union. Hybrid abomination, one human protester shouted at the reinforced windows. Species contamination. On the other side, a group of Ventari purists held signs in their flowing script that Silari quietly translated as equally condemning. They call our bond a sacred perversion, she said, her hand protectively covering her now visible pregnancy. They say I have defiled the purity of our bloodline. Eric pulled her away from the window, his jaw tight with anger. Don't listen to them. They're afraid of what they don't understand. Fear I can accept, Silari replied, settling into her favorite chair with the graceful movements her pregnancy hadn't yet hindered. It is the hatred that troubles me, for our child's sake. Their morning was interrupted by Admiral Hayes, the commanding officer overseeing the diplomatic negotiations. Her expression was grim as she entered with a full security escort. We have a problem, Hayes announced without preamble. Intelligence has identified credible threats against both of you. There's been chatter about a joint operation between human and Ventari extremist groups. Eric felt Silari's fear spike through their bond, not for herself, but for their unborn child. He moved to stand behind her chair, his hands resting protectively on her shoulders. What kind of threats? Eric asked. The kind that end with martyrdom, Hayes replied grimly. We're moving you to a secure facility on Kepler 438b. It's a joint colony world with better security protocols. The transport to Kepler 438b was uneventful, but Eric couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Silari seemed to sense it too, her usual serene demeanor replaced by watchful alertness. Her pregnancy had enhanced her already keen Ventari senses, making her more aware of potential dangers. The colony world was beautiful, a carefully terraformed paradise where humans and several alien species lived in harmony. Their new quarters were in the diplomatic sector, surrounded by gardens that reminded Silari of her homeworld. It's peaceful here, she observed as they settled in for their first night. Too peaceful, Eric replied, checking the security systems, for the third time. Something feels off. He was right to be concerned. 2 days later, while Eric was at the local medical facility consulting on xenobiology protocols, the attack came. Silari was tending to her small garden when she sensed movement in the nearby trees. Her enhanced senses picked up the distinctive chemical signatures of both human and Ventari weaponry. The extremists had found them. Moving with surprising speed for someone 6 months pregnant, Silari activated the emergency beacon and took cover behind the reinforced garden wall. Energy blasts scorched the air where she'd been standing moments before. Abomination! A human voice shouted from the tree line. Your unholy offspring will not poison our future, a Ventari voice answered in their musical language, equally condemning. Silari realized with growing horror that members of both species had united in their desire to destroy what she and Eric represented. Eric was halfway across the colony when the emergency alert reached him. The bond between them carried Silari's fear and determination, spurring him to commandeer a security speeder and race toward their quarters. He arrived to find Silari pinned down by crossfire, Her hands protectively curved around her swollen belly. Rage, unlike anything he'd ever felt, blazed through him at the sight of anyone threatening his family. "Stay down," he shouted to her as he rolled behind cover, pulling the sidearm he'd started carrying after the first threats. The firefight was brief but intense. Colony security arrived within minutes, but not before one of the attackers got close enough to threaten Sailari directly. Eric watched in amazement as his gentle, scholarly mate transformed into a fierce warrior, her protective instincts unleashed. The Ventari extremist raised his weapon toward her belly, and Sailari moved with lethal grace. Her hand struck his wrist with precisely applied force, breaking bone and sending the weapon flying. Before he could recover, she had him on the ground, her foot on his throat. "You dare threaten my child?" she hissed, and for the first time Eric heard the deadly edge that lurked beneath her civilized exterior. "You are no true Ventari. You dishonor the very blood you claim to protect." When security took the attacker away, Sailari collapsed into Eric's arms, the adrenaline leaving her system. I thought they might," she whispered against his chest. "Never," Eric said fiercely, holding her tight. "I will never let anyone hurt you or our baby. Never." That night, they made love with desperate intensity, reaffirming their connection in the face of a galaxy that seemed determined to tear them apart. Their joining was passionate and primal, driven by the need to cling to each other against the storm of opposition surrounding them. "Promise me," Sailari gasped, as Eric moved within her, their bond blazing with shared sensation. "Promise me that no matter what happens, our child will know they were conceived in love." "I promise," Eric replied, his own voice rough with emotion. "They'll know they were wanted, loved, celebrated. They'll know their parents fought for them." Their climax was explosive, the bond between them strengthening with each shared breath, each whispered endearment. When they finally lay still, wrapped in each other's arms, Eric felt something shift within him, a final acceptance of what they were, together. "I'm done hiding," he said quietly. "I'm done letting others dictate what we are or what our child will be." Sailari lifted her head to look at him, seeing new determination in his eyes. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying it's time we stopped being victims of other people's fear. It's time we showed the galaxy what a true bond looks like." Sailari smiled, her hand finding his over their baby's movements. "Together?" "Always together," Eric confirmed. "Whatever comes next, we face it as one." Outside their window, the twin moons of Kepler 438b rose over the peaceful colony, casting silver light on a world where different species had learned to coexist. It was a reminder that harmony was possible. They just had to be brave enough to fight for it. 9 months after their first meeting on a toxic moon, Eric Vance stood in the medical bay of Kepler 438b's primary hospital, holding his newborn daughter. She was perfect, a beautiful blend of both her parents' features, with Eric's dark hair, and Sailari's luminescent skin that glowed softly in the dim light. "She's incredible," Dr. Reeves, the head of xenobiology, murmured as she ran final scans. "Her cellular structure is completely unique. She has the best of both species' adaptations." Sailari, exhausted but radiant in the recovery bed, smiled as Eric brought their daughter to her. "Hello, little star," she whispered in Ventari, her finger tracing the baby's glowing cheek. "We have waited so long to meet you." "What should we call her?" Eric asked, settling beside them on the bed. "Among my people, children born of bonds such as ours are given names that reflect unity," Sailari explained softly. "I was thinking, Astra. It means star in your language, and in mine it means bridge between worlds." "Astra Vance," Eric said, testing the name. "I like it. Astra Vance, the little girl who's going to change everything." As if she understood, baby Astra opened, her eyes, violet like her mother's but flecked with brown like her father's. She looked between her parents with what seemed like ancient wisdom, then settled contentedly in their shared embrace. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of media attention, political negotiations, and scientific fascination. Astra became the galaxy's first confirmed viable human-alien hybrid, her very existence proof that the barriers between species weren't as insurmountable as previously believed. Eric's parents arrived from Earth, initially nervous about meeting their alien daughter-in-law and hybrid granddaughter. But Sayalari's gentle wisdom and Astra's undeniable charm quickly won them over. "She has your stubborn streak," Eric's mother, Catherine, observed as she rocked the fussing baby. "And her mother's grace." "She has both our hearts," Eric replied, watching Sayalari teach his father a Ventari lullaby. The sight of his family, accepting his chosen mate, filled him with profound contentment. Sayalari's parents arrived a week later, elegant beings who radiated the same inner light as their daughter. Their initial reservation melted when they saw how deeply Eric loved their daughter and how carefully he cared for their granddaughter. "You honor the bond," Sayalari's father, Counselor Thael, told Eric during a private moment. "Not all matings, even among our own people, show such devotion." "She saved me too," Eric replied simply, "in ways I'm still discovering." 3 months after Astra's birth, Eric and Sayalari stood before a joint assembly of human and Ventari representatives, their daughter sleeping peacefully in Sayalari's arms. They were there to present the new protocols they'd developed for interspecies medical contact, guidelines that would prevent future accidental bondings while respecting the sacred nature of Ventari biology. "Our bond began as a misunderstanding," Eric addressed the assembly, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "But it became something beautiful because we chose to embrace it rather than fight it. We hope that our experience can help both our species learn from each other." "We are not asking you to change your beliefs or abandon your traditions," Sayalari added, her voice musical even in formal address. "We ask only that you consider the possibility that diversity strengthens us all." The protocols were unanimously approved, establishing Eric and Sayalari as permanent ambassadors between their species. They were given a home on Kepler 438b, where they could raise their daughter and continue building bridges between worlds. That night, in their new home overlooking the colony's central gardens, Eric and Sayalari celebrated in the privacy of their bedroom. Their lovemaking was tender and passionate, a reaffirmation of the bond that had brought them together and the love that kept them strong. "Do you ever regret it?" Sayalari asked afterward, tracing patterns on Eric's chest as he held her close. "The way our lives changed so completely?" "Never," Eric replied without hesitation. "You and Astra are the best things that ever happened to me. Even if I'd known what that transfusion would lead to, I'd do it again in a heartbeat." Sayalari lifted her head to smile at him. "Even knowing you'd be stuck with a stubborn alien wife and a daughter who glows in the dark?" Eric laughed, pulling her up for a kiss. "Especially then. I love your stubbornness, and Astra's glow is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, except for her mother's." "Flatterer," Sayalari accused, but her eyes shone with happiness. "Truth-teller," Eric corrected, then grew more serious. "Sayalari, there's something I've been thinking about." "Oh? Another child? I know it's soon, but watching you with Astra, seeing how natural you are as a mother, I want our daughter to have a sibling. I want our family to grow." Sayalari's smile was radiant. "I have been hoping you would say that. The bond between us grows stronger each day, and I believe our next child will be even more remarkable." "Our next child?" Eric raised an eyebrow. "Already planning ahead?" The Ventari sang, "Love shared multiplies infinitely," Sayalari quoted, moving to straddle him with fluid grace. "Shall we begin working on that multiplication?" Their passionate reunion was interrupted by Astra's soft cries from the nursery. They dressed quickly and went to tend to their daughter, finding her wide awake and seemingly fascinated by the way the moonlight made her skin sparkle. "She's going to be extraordinary," Eric murmured, lifting the baby to his shoulder. "She already is," Sayalari replied, wrapping her arms around both her loves. "As is the man who saved my life and gave me a reason to live it fully." 5 years later, Eric and Sayalari stood on the same balcony, watching their 3 children play in the garden below. Astra, now a precocious 5-year-old who glowed brighter when excited, was teaching her younger twin brothers, Marcus and Cale, How to identify different plant species. Mama, Papa, Astra called up to them. Come see what we found. Eric and Sailari exchanged amused glances before heading down to investigate their daughter's latest discovery. As they walked hand in hand through the garden they'd built together, surrounded by the sound of their children's laughter, Eric reflected on the strange turns life could take. What began as a desperate medical procedure had become the foundation of a love that transcended species, politics, and every obstacle the galaxy could throw at them. Their children were living proof that differences could be strengths, that love could bridge any gap. No regrets? Sailari asked, as if reading his thoughts through their ever-present bond. None, Eric replied, squeezing her hand. Not a single one. As their children ran to greet them, their laughter echoing across the peaceful colony, Eric knew that their story was far from over. They were ambassadors, parents, partners, and proof that sometimes the most beautiful things in life came from the most unexpected places. Their blood had saved her. Their love had saved them both. And their children would help save the future, one bridge at a time.